Hello there. My name is Sebastian Schraub, and I'm the Principal Solutions Architect at N2WS. And last time I showed you how to install N2WS Backup and Recovery in your AWS account. Now this time we'll talk about how to configure backups as well. So we're currently at the dashboard and we already performed the initial backup of the backup solution itself. So now we're going to see that we've performed one backup, we're protecting one account, we already created one policy, we have one protected resource and one first snapshot. We're on our way to be extremely secure. So the first thing I'm going to do now is I will create a new schedule. So I'm going to go over here to the left side, schedules. We already have one, but I'm going to create an additional schedule. I'm going to call this one daily, and this one should happen at midnight. So I'm going to select midnight for that. There we go. And this is my time zone, New York, and I want this to repeat every day. So let's click on save. So the next part is we're going to create a policy. So let's switch back to policies. That's the policy we already created last time. So I'm going to click new and I'm going to call this one production. And I can also associate it with the schedule we just created. That's our midnight schedule. There we go. Now I can now go through the wizard. I can either select it right here at the different tabs, or you can just simply click on next, which will then take you to the next section in the wizard. So if I click on this, my backup targets. So what resource do I actually want to back up? Click on add backup targets, and these are all of the different resources. Now in my case, I'm going to choose an instance. I'm going to choose instance, and this will then show me all of the resources I have in this region. You can just simply click up here and switch between the different regions if you'd like to. You also have the option to move these columns if you really want to see what the different names are. So I'm going to choose one of my instances now. I'm going to choose my Linux Apache right there. I'm going to click on add selected, and the moment you select this, it will actually move the content into that policy. See right there. So now I can hit close. There's my policy. I have a few more options now. The default selection will always select all of the volumes, but if you really want to, you can make changes to this. So if you select that resource and click on configure, you can actually see all of the different volumes that are included here. Now in this case, I only have one volume, so that's why that is already pre-selected. It's not really something you have to do. If you click on next, that'll take you to the next step of the wizard. So you can use Linux backup scripts. This is necessary for, in this case, application consistent backups. If I click on next again, that'll take us to disaster recovery backups. Because at this point, we're going to create a backup of the data into the same region where the data is currently residing. But if you want to avoid that danger of not being able to access the data if perhaps that region becomes unavailable, then you can also choose to perform disaster recovery backups into other regions. Let me just show you real quick how this works. So if you turn on disaster recovery, then you can choose, well, how often would you like these disaster recovery backups to occur on each backup or every other backup and so on. And you can also choose in which region you want this disaster recovery backup to be transported to. Now, in my case, my workload is located in North Virginia, so I could choose to then create a disaster recovery backup of that resource in any of the other regions. So that's an option as well, and you even have the option to create a cross-account disaster recovery. But for now, I'm just going to turn this off. We're just going to create a regular operational backup into the same region. If I click on next, this is our lifecycle management tab. So here we have a few more options. I can now choose how many generations of backups do I want to retain. Remember, I'm creating daily backups, so 30, that would mean 1 month. I'm going to lower this. I'm going to lower this to 7 days, 7 generations of backups. Down here, we also have the option to archive the data into S3, but that's a whole new chapter that we're going to talk about in the next video as well. So for now, we're going to choose Save. And that's already it. Now I have my policy. It's already created. And if you want to, you can run it immediately. All you have to do is just select it and click on Run ASAP. And that will trigger that policy to run immediately. So if you select the backup monitor, once again, if we refresh it, we can now see that policy in progress. Right? If we have the refresh button, then the backup is now successful. It is interesting because now we can switch back to the dashboard and take a look at the resources that we're now backing up. Well, that is great news. So now we have 2 backups in the last 24 hours. Still 1 account, 2 policies, 2 protected resources, and 2 snapshots. We're really getting there. When you're performing backups of your resources, always keep in mind the very first backup is going to be a full backup. Every subsequent backup is going to be an incremental. So the very first backup will always take longer than any of the subsequent backups. Let's make a quick change now to our policy. So we're going to go back to policies. That's still my production policy we just created. So let's edit this policy now. So in this case, let's actually turn on disaster recovery because I want to show you what that looks like. So we're going to turn it on. We're going to choose the region where we're going to create that backup. There we go. I'm going to choose Ohio. And I'm going to click on Save. So now to try this, we're going to run that policy again. So click on Run ASAP. So now we can go back to our backup monitor. And as you can see, that backup is now running again in progress, but the disaster recovery backup is also being processed. So again, let's just wait a moment, and then we're going to hit the refresh button and see what happens. All right, so I waited a couple minutes, then I pressed the refresh button, and now our backup is successful, and also our disaster recovery backup into the other region is also completed. I don't know about you, but I'm excited to actually try this out. What does a recovery now looks like? Because all the backups in the world aren't going to do you much good if it's very difficult, time-consuming, and complex to get the data back into place. So let's play through a recovery. Most of your journeys are probably going to start with the backup monitor because it's your single pane of glass. It shows you all of the backups you've performed. You can then search these backups by resource name. You can also search for specific policies, accounts, and so on. Now, in our case, it's pretty simple because we can still see all of the backups we've performed, so there's really no need to filter this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a backup policy that I want to choose from in order to recover. So I'm going to choose the last backup we've performed just now. Now over here, I can now click on Recover, and that's going to take us to the contents of that policy. And there it is. That's the policy and the resource that we backed up. That was my Apache right here. So now what I can do is I can choose that resource. And now I have 3 options. Recover is going to allow me to recover the entire instance, exactly as it was when we performed the backup. I also have the option to only recover certain volumes, and that will then subsequently give me the opportunity to either attach the recovered volumes to a different instance or the original instance. And last but not least, you also have Explore. That will allow you to do a file level explore of the content of this particular backup. Now in our case, let's do an instance recovery. So I'm going to click on Recover. So this is what we're going to see now. We have a few more options. We can make changes to the instance type, but if you don't touch anything, this is the default settings. This is exactly what that instance was like when we performed the backup. That's the IP address, that's the security group, the subnet, the VPC, and also the instance type itself. If you wanted to, you do have the option to make changes here. Now, this is the VPC in North Virginia, but if you wanted to perform a disaster recovery into a different region, you can do that as well. Let's just hit close here for a moment. So once again, this is the instance that we have backed up. See up here you have more options. If you performed a disaster recovery into a different account, that would show up here. That would be an option. Now, in our case, we did perform a disaster recovery into Ohio, so I bet when we're going to open this, we're actually going to see Ohio here in the drop-down. There it is. So that's an option as well. So if we want to do that, I can select to recover into Ohio. All right, so let's once again go back into our recovery option. And there we go. So now it will already be pre-selected with the correct settings. There we go. And now let's click on Recover Instance. I'm going to say, are you sure you want to do this? You want to recover this entire instance. So I'm going to click once again on Recover. And now it will take us to the recovery monitor to actually observe how that recovery will proceed. There we go. Usually the recovery doesn't take a long time. So as you can see in our recovery monitor, the recovery already succeeded. And if you really want to take a look at what that looks like, let's go to the EC2 console. We're going to switch to Ohio. And I'm also going to remove my filter. And there it is. That's the instance. It's still initializing, but it's already up and running. So we actually performed a complete recovery of that instance from one region into an entirely different region. That's really how easy it is. All right, one more check. We're going to switch back to our dashboard, and yes, here we have more backups, and now our disaster recoveries are also getting up here in numbers. So now we have one disaster recovery available as well. I think the next part we should probably try is the S3 backups. So thank you for joining me, and I hope you're going to tune in for the next video as well to see how we're going to perform an S3 backup.